It seems by its very nature, in my limited experience with meditation, that you get to a place where, and you can relate to this because I think meditative experiences are not just on a meditative mat, but
Right.
happen oftentimes for many people in many different ways through intuitive flashes of knowing, looking at a sunset or seeing clouds or
Right.
looking at mountains. And these things are
Forms of contemplation. Right?
they're forms of contemplation, but it's sort of like putting a title on a song. You know what I mean? That
Mhm.
it is not the song; it is the title for the song. And so
Huh.
these experiences, when you try to quantify them in words, fail because they are not the experience itself.
Yeah, I wonder whether certain words might succeed, though. As you talked about these contemplative or reflective or introspective moments, whatever you might choose to describe, however you might choose to describe them, the best minds in history get close. I think they get really close. In fact, for me, they take care of it. I mean, if you read the best poems ever written, or you go and look at the best paintings ever painted, it's like these experiences have been formalized for you. And I suspect that's one of the reasons, although I could be completely wrong, but I suspect that that's why I don't find myself susceptible to meditations of that kind, because my deep spirit is satisfied with these great works of art. And you have to go, it's as if you're going there to meditate.
Yeah.
And it's not just something that happens. Like meditations probably don't just happen. You have to go there and be, and this may be an oxymoron, you have to be an active participant and in that way maybe lose your activity. I mean, but the point is that you can't just have this thing happen. You have to engage to some extent the work of art or the moment.
Absolutely do.
So I just think that I've been so fortunate to have been susceptible. Apollinaire said, I'm simply a sensitive soul in the presence of beauty.
Yeah.
And I feel that way all the time.
Yeah.
I have my whole life. And so maybe that's why, I don't need to sort of contemplate this meditative
I don't
issues.
think it's unusual for artists to express that very notion, that very thing. You know what I mean? And it is the reason why they're called to create things, is because they see and take in, absorb so much of that which is around us. And in our, you could say like a sculpture is your own version of trying to make sense of things. And
one of my favorite definitions of art touches that a little bit. It's Ayn Rand, who a lot of people will probably identify as this very conservative.
Yeah, no, I read Atlas.
I mean, she's not all left-wing and modern, but her concept of art is something like things which give form to the deepest important sensibilities in our lives, the things that we can't hold in front of us because they don't take the shape of forms. They are ideas, the beautiful, important ideas that fly through our minds. The great works of art make these ideas into objects. And as objects, we can hold them. And I think that from what I'm woefully uninitiated in meditative, histories and techniques, but it seems that a lot of the folks that talk about meditation are talking about getting to a place where you're almost not there. You just let go of everything, and so.
It seems like you can relate to that through maybe working on art or sculpture. That it is, I mean, just because it is in the formal context of a religious thing and you're doing it as art, doesn't mean that there isn't a shared inherent root.
Yeah,
you know
right.
What I mean?
I think there is.
So it seems that you can relate to that. And
For sure.
I wanted to ask you about, what is your take on from my perspective, an important facet of the universe is that inherently at its root it is one existence. And I'm curious what angle you would take on that.
There's a term that I love, a word, it's anthropic. The word is called anthropic, and it really means that humans can't get out of their own way when they think, and that they tend to construct these images, these ideas, these pictures of reality with them somewhere in them.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's one of the beautiful things about, say, Oriental art, that the figure is always in relation to the majesty of the mountain and to the majesty of nature.
The problem that sometimes crops up there, though, is that we tend to overdo it, I think, when we're offering explanations of origins, of meanings, of purposes. We're in there all the time. Rome used to be the center of the universe. I don't know if you knew that. And then that's one of the reasons they were so upset with Galileo, of course, because he took this little telescope and he said, wait a minute now, everything's not going around Rome, apparently. But when we talk about the universe, the big U, there are a lot of, even scientists can't get away from this problem, and they talk about the elemental construction of nature seems to be so perfectly constructed as to have anticipated us. The way things just happen to be put together, we couldn't really exist if it weren't for these certain sequences of physical, peculiarities. Well, that's
Do you have a butt? Do you have a button there?
Yeah. Oh, of course, of course. Saw an old cartoon years ago, two Martians looking through a telescope up at Earth, and one said to the other, I'm told by our scientists that there's way too much oxygen on that planet to support life. It's just that we want to be important. That's why we invent religion. That's why the creator of the universe that's why we're in the creator's image. I mean, that's absurd. But the creator has a plan for us. He watches us every day. He's going to help. I mean, that's capital A, anthropic. But
I will give you this, Graham.
Yeah.
That our expectations of what life should be have been deeply shaped by our ideas that life is just and God is just and that things are good and that good
unless
things
you're
happen
the
to good
Canaanites
people.
or the Midianites or a woman, in which case, do you know the first line of and I think it's the Hasidic prayer, thank you, God, for not making me what?
A woman.
Or a Gentile.
Yeah.
It's not really, you can't get away from it, So anyways, our explanations always tend to be okay, here's another great quote. Who said this? Freud? I think he said it. He said, humanity has from time to time suffered at the hands of science, severe blows to its naive self-love. When Galileo told us that we weren't at the center of the universe, when Darwin told us that we weren't God's specifically created, top of the pyramid species, and then, I mean, there are a sequence of come downs, But so the universe being one, that's a problem of mind and language. What does that mean? Even the word that we use to start the show, spirituality.
Sure.
Spirituality essentially means the soul, a non-material entity, which is a contradiction and an invention and really a misleading kind of term. It originates from a time when we didn't have an alternative view and frankly didn't have a real nuanced description of consciousness, which is one of the great reasons for reading the world's best literature. You all of a sudden pour your experience out into these giant vessels called Tolstoy and Shakespeare and Dickinson and but we can say some crazy things and they can start us in the wrong direction immediately. I mean, we can say a married bachelor, we can say a round square, we can say anything we want to say, and then we rack our brains trying to square those circles or marry those bachelors. We need to speak as clearly as we can, as often as we can, unless we're just creating open verse. That's,
no.
Then you can do whatever you want to, and that's its own fun. But so we have these problems describing things, and religion has taken tremendous advantage of that, I think.
Well, I'm with you in that. I obviously there are tremendous problems with religion. I think what religion is born out of are these sort of meditative experiences or awakening experiences that certain specific, very few individuals have had, which are born out of not necessarily an experience of God, if you want to use that word or label, but just
existence, right? I mean, consciousness, awareness.
Consciousness, yes. Of the root of their consciousness, which you and I was thinking about you, Graham, before I came here, in that there are many similarities in our viewpoint. It's just a lot of it is semantics.
You got me interested in a line of thought earlier when you asked, "What are we?"
Yeah.
I think I'm a big proponent, fan, whatever, of a Darwinian approach to knowledge, especially biological issues, dealing with living things. It's so informative. It's unbelievable. I personally feel that the ideas that are contained in the theory of evolution, the neo theory, because it's been modified somewhat, are as powerful a collection of ideas as have ever been constructed by humans. You might be able to come up with 2 or 3 others that were as, I don't know what they'd be. Newton, universal gravitation, the genetic stuff that has taken place in the 20th century, but the idea that humans and all animals have evolved, slowly have evolved, so that it's safe to say that at some point in our history, and maybe not too far in the past, humans were not particularly conscious. They were, quasi-conscious. Consciousness has emerged, at least to the degree that we possess it now. Because we look around at the other animals that we share the planet with, and we see certain consciousness, levels, but certainly nothing like what we've got going on, apparently. As I said before, we're writing symphonies. Yeah. We're doing things like you and I are doing right now.
Yeah.
But at some point in the past, we didn't have these capacities. And we emerged into this new, intellectual landscape where we had a self-aware, consciousness. So I'm thinking that it's possible that some of these religious impulses and behaviors, a moth navigates by moon and stars. Mm-hmm. Now, when electric lights or gas lights or bonfires start showing up on the planet,
it's a good analogy, yeah.
It runs amok because it's not designed for these contingencies. I think that religion, and this is one of the suggestions that a Darwinian view would lead you to, religion is probably an unintended consequence of a particular behavior of ours, maybe the capacity for profound love, because a religious experience has often been described as comparable to the passion of being in love. Mm-hmm. Priests talk about it, but anyway, so it may just be this unintended consequence, and something that we will eventually bypass.
Well, I think, where I sit with this is that I can see religion falling to the wayside. But what I don't...
certainly not the thing that it claims to treat of.
No.
Morality, love. The
it does and doesn't.
Of,
it falls very short. And I think...
But we can't do it
in the broad
things.
spectrum, there's a gradation.
Yeah.
And some hit, some miss. But those genuine accounts of, like, say, and I'm not talking about the New Testament and what was recorded, what Jesus said, but the actual experience that Jesus had, or the actual experience that Moses had, or the actual experience that Muhammad had, that these genuine encounters with the root of oneself, the deep, profound root of one's own consciousness, and what is at the source of things, that, I think, is the future of humankind, that we're moving towards this kind of, it's an expansion of our awareness, and it goes sort of in an evolutionary Darwinian kind of
well,
theme.
You might think that a logical sort of progression, therefore, would be the understanding that women have been systematically, sort of institutionally mistreated by religion. And I don't know that a deeper reading of these books, and you know what, I'm misconstruing your point, I'm sure.
No, it's okay.
But that somehow, I mean, those texts, those paradigms, those constructions have to completely disappear. Science has to obliterate all of the ancient, all of the Bronze Age stories. They must go into the as I said before, the graveyard of mythology. And that, we don't need, there's no good act or moral statement that can be uttered from a religious point of view that can't be uttered by an atheist. There's not a single thing. They're useless as social constructions. They're absolutely useless. In fact, as such, they're the single greatest cause of hatred, of war, of mistrust, of...
Well, I mean, they are... yeah, I mean, yes, I agree with you that they're...
I personally don't think there's a single, compensating quality. I mean, philanthropy... America's great philanthropists have largely been atheists. You don't want to be compelled by fear to behave well. That's just completely inauthentic ethical behavior. That's not the way to predicate a life of good behavior. That you're fearful of no reward, or it's got to be something that you are authentically aware of and concerned. The judgment that you make yourself. I'm not because you're being threatened, coerced.
Right.
No, this takes it all out of your hands. In fact, it's essentially a dehumanizing institution in that regard. You can't claim your own behavior. I mean, it's 24-hour invigilation. It's like North Korea. I mean, religion. It's just, it dehumanizes. It really, I think. I mean, I know there are people who disagree with me, but Thomas Jefferson isn't one of them. Freud and Einstein aren't one of them. It's amazing the number of people who are just flat out non-believers, and you wouldn't know it. Almost all the founding fathers, and at the time they weren't aware of the great mitigating explanation, which happens to be the explanation that Darwin offered. Right. Where does stuff come from? Well, if you didn't know, maybe you had the excuse, oh, well, we'll just say, God made it. I don't know what that means. I don't know how people thought that through. Well, how did God make it, and where did God come from? But they don't seem to want to do that work. They just want to say God, and then, I'll go have lunch. But until that great idea was popular and everyone could understand it and say, oh, of course, this is where we came from. This is how it works. So God now is reduced dramatically to this, this old sort of useless thing.
I don't, as I've stated before, I don't throw out all of religion, in that I do believe that there is an element of it that is valid to a point, in that it is trying to convey what it is we are doing here, and in that, like I said,
isn't that though just like saying religion is trying, some parts of religion address some of the same questions that I find deep, profoundly important.
Well, no. I think Shakespeare is a form of, it's like a different version of, say, the Bible.
Right.
In
exactly.
that
it brings deep questions,
the human condition, existential.
Sure. Right. The joys, the nuances of contemplation, death, fear, love.
Yeah.
But my question is, what does religion offer that you can't find elsewhere? Why religion with all its baggage? Why not just say, yes, I'm serious about life. I'm deeply contemplative. I want the best. I want to behave as morally as I can. I want to know all about how to live a moral life. But why go and read a book that contains in it, murdering children and wiping out tribes and taking slaves and all these terrible things? Clearly not more. Why not just read Shakespeare? Why not take other sources for these?
Sure, I think you can take other sources, but I think to throw religion out in its entirety is cutting oneself off from a source that has the potential to be both instructive and, I'll say it, and you'll jump on it, comforting. But
is it comforting to think that there's a piece of gold the size of a Volkswagen buried in your yard? It probably would be. Or is it comforting to I had a great analogy for this the other day, but I'm talking about true. I'm talking about people who go out and say, the metaphysics of martyrdom. I believe that if I go strap a bomb and walk into this bus, I'm going to take all my family to heaven.
Yeah,
that makes them feel good.
I agree that
is a comforting metaphysics.
Sure, but
and yet it's so obviously not true. Is
right,
truth
that's true, but the
play
thing
a
is,
part at
though,
all in this comfort factor? I mean, shouldn't it? I mean, because
many things are so dependent upon context. Okay, so that comfort, even in religion, let's take religion. Religion in its context can be both beneficial to humankind and destructive. And
right.
I say that because I think that, obviously terrorism and the religious root of terrorism is obviously something that is harmful and sort of like a cancer within humankind. But there are many acts that people are inspired to do that are gleaned from, say, reading the beneficial teachings of, say, the New Testament, the Quran, or the Old Testament. I'm not saying that.
Right.
I'm not saying that there isn't.
Well, I have a couple of problems with that, and
sure.
One is that sounds like a fairly moderate position. Honestly, the thing that bothers me about that is that if you say, religion is okay because it has certain redeeming factors, you're cutting out a lot of safe ground for people who are just a little more pious and just a little more.
Sure. But we do this as human beings, Graham, if you think about it, because, not all of our human condition living in the human body is sunsets and mountains and art.
Of course.
So what do? We tend to neglect or deny, not all, but we have to. There's a huge element of denial in the human condition, in human psychology, because of the difficulty and the difficult nature of what life is. Right?
It's been said, and I totally agree, that the single greatest contributing cause to worldwide poverty is religious influence on women. The inability for women to develop their own sexual behaviors, their own identities in families. They're forced into all kinds of behaviors that the church says that condoms are worse than AIDS. Women are chattel, and they're not able to resist being mothers when they want to. I mean, and the church is largely responsible for this. I mean, the Christian church has told women that they are actually the product of men. I mean, that God took portions of men and made women of them. And I mean, I don't know, women's condition worldwide has been made much worse by religion. And
okay, I agree with that.
I mean, that on its own is reason to just, start over. And, how about this? People often make the point that, well, it's there. It's this huge institution. It's shaped everything and everybody for millennia. In 1974, if you'd asked the Republicans in America, the solution for you is going to be a divorced, second-rate movie actor. We just haven't tried anything other than these old structures. The point is that Ronald Reagan came and turned America on its 180 degrees.
Yeah.
Saved our ass for a while there. No one would have said that's going to work. But it worked beautifully. I mean, we just need to get this thing rolling. I mean, people are fully capable of understanding the nature of their lives and their experiences, and we all want to be decent. I don't think there's any doubt that people in general are good-natured, well-intended. I mean, if there's not enough food to go around, that's another story.
But actually, there is, right? There is enough food to go around.
There could be if women were allowed to stop having so many children, maybe control the future of their families.
Yeah.
I mean, but I don't know, Joel. What do you think?
Well, I think a few things, Graham, and I'm just we can edit this out, but we're running over an hour.
You go ahead and select what you will from our discussion.
Oh no, yeah, we're
fine with whatever you choose to present.
We could go longer if you'd like, or if you're getting tired.
Why don't you call it? I'm fine. I'm enjoying it, but
would you like
sound more and more unintelligent as we go? So
yeah, all right. Well, I just wanted to wrap up with one notion, one thought, and that is that it would be that our connection with the deeper aspect of ourselves through meditation, which does not need to be formal but can be whatever, is really the solution that I offer. That I think that getting away from, and I always say this, Graham, and we didn't really get a chance to talk about it or cover it, but no book should come between the kindness of two people. You know what I mean? No literature, nothing that is written should prevent two people from coming together and sharing kindness and
that's a perfect preamble to an idea that I was going to express.
Yeah.
Which I'll do so now. I would recommend that people start at a young age and read the great works of literature, read the great histories, read the great poems and the great novels, and read Homer and Virgil and read Shakespeare and Dickinson, and just read, because, as I said earlier, we do have this sort of insatiable sense of the beauty and the impossibility of our lives. This lightness of being. I love that old novel title. But if we can get into us these great sensibilities, ideas about life, knowledge of history, the best expression, the most beautiful stories, we will expand and deepen, and so that when we come to our brothers and sisters, we come with so much more. We come with a receptivity and a sensitivity and an ability to see and sort of experience, humanness and beauty and our lives really profoundly. If you come in with less scope, less depth, less perspective, your experience suffers. And I think that, as you say, let no book come between people, and yet the great books and the great experiences, the great ideas can absolutely open our experiences
they can bind
to one another.
people,
Yeah,
certainly. Yeah, I agree with that.
So, and in that spirit, I think we can do away with some of these other less fortunate, stories of the world. But
okay,
you think?
Yeah.
Oh, I really enjoyed that, and I'd like to do it about 4 more times before I felt like I said anything important or good. But
no, it was very enjoyable, Graham.
Thanks,
I appreciate
Joel.
it.
Thanks, I appreciate it. I'll do it anytime, and I think I'll start listening to the other programs, which I just wasn't aware of previously.
Yeah.
So
tonight's guest was Graham Sears. Thank you very much, Graham.
Thank you, Joel.